Hemophilia is a disease that is commonly associated with royalty, particularly with the family of Queen Victoria, whose son, several grandsons, and great-grandsons all inherited the disease. Hemophilia, just briefly, is a disease that prevents a person's blood from clotting normally. Thus, bruising and even minor accidents can become major illnesses. In the years before modern medical treatment, particularly modern medication and modern internal diagnostic techniques, people with hemophilia often did not live into their adulthood. It was a disease associated with a lot of pain. Minor bruises could become major hemorrhages that would last for several weeks and could become particularly dangerous if they involved an internal organ, the brain, or even a joint, where the bleeding could bleed into the joint socket of a knee or an elbow. And also, there was a great deal of pain involved. For this reason, the parents of a hemophiliac dreaded any accident that might befall their son. Hemophilia is carried on the X chromosome. It is a mutation on the X chromosome, which means that females can be potential carriers with the ability to transmit the disease to any or all of the sons that they bear. How hemophilia came into the British royal family is a mystery, since no one in the family prior to Victoria had any experience with the disease. Victoria ruled the United Kingdom from 1837 to 1901. In 1840, she married her cousin, Prince Albert of Saxe-Coburg-Gotha, and the couple had 9 children. All 9 of their children lived to adulthood, which was a record in those days, where there was high infant mortality to begin with. However, it was with the birth of their 8th child, their 4th son, in 1853, that they began to notice that something was wrong in their family. Prince Leopold, later Duke of Albany, not only was born mildly epileptic, but he also began to show the bleeding and telltale bruising and hemorrhaging signs indicating that he had been afflicted with the disease hemophilia. Leopold was an intelligent, strong-minded little boy who, like all little boys, was rambunctious and wanted to get into mischief. He dreamed of a military career. However, because of his hemophilia, there was no likelihood that he would have been accepted into the army, even if his mother had let him go there. Instead, as he grew older, Leopold became his mother's personal assistant and often represented Queen Victoria on trips to various places within the British Commonwealth. Leopold was married, and unfortunately, at the age of 30, he died of internal hemorrhaging suffered from a fall while he was traveling in France, leaving behind a wife with an infant toddler, little girl, and his wife was pregnant. His son, born just a few months after his father's death, was all right. Leopold could not transmit his disease to his own son. However, he could transmit to his daughter the ability to become a carrier, and his daughter, Alice, in later life, had her own son, Rupert, who died at the age of 20 in a car accident from otherwise harmless injuries which had provoked severe internal bleeding. This was one of the first of Queen Victoria's great-grandsons who would develop a lethal fascination with cars. Alice was named for her aunt, who was Queen Victoria's second eldest daughter. Princess Alice of the United Kingdom married into the Grand Ducal family of Hesse. She was the wife of Grand Duke Louis IV of Hesse. Princess Alice bore her husband 7 children in total, 2 sons. The first of her sons, Prince Friedrich, called Friddy in the family, soon developed the signs and symptoms of hemophilia. It was with Friddy's birth that Queen Victoria realized sadly that this disease was in her family to stay. Friddy died while playing on a balcony. He fell through a large window to the second-story window to the cobblestones below. Although he was apparently unhurt, he was soon dead within hours of massive internal hemorrhaging. Although this accident might have been fatal for a child even today, the fact that he was hemophiliac certainly didn't help in any possibility of his recovery. Alice's 4 daughters who survived to adulthood to have families of her own. The two youngest were the ones who unfortunately would carry this gene on into their own families. Princess Irina married into the Prussian royal family, Prince Heinrich of Prussia. She bore her husband 3 sons. Of them, little Henry Jr. and her eldest son Waldemar had hemophilia. Henry Jr. was dead before 4. However, Waldemar beat the odds at the time, living to the ripe old age for a hemophiliac of 56. Waldemar was born in 1889, and despite the severity of his illness, he insisted on living as normal a life as possible, including getting married. Although he and his wife were childless, Waldemar was able to live his own life, and after the loss of the German monarchy or German imperial power in 1918, he and his wife were allowed to live in retirement in Bavaria, Germany. By this time, medical care had progressed so that hemophiliacs often relied on a series of blood transfusions to promote the clotting of their blood and avoid any possibility that they would hemorrhage if they would have any sort of accident. On this method, Waldemar survived for many years until 1945, during the aftermath of World War II, when Germany was in ruins and medical care simply was not available. In 1945, he died of a massive hemorrhage, and his wife was left to wash and dress her husband's own body, and with the help of a local gravedigger, he was laid in an unknown grave before he was later able to be interred in the family burial ground. Waldemar represents one tragedy in a family with hemophilia, the death just of sheer agony for want of proper medical care. Waldemar's first cousin, Alexei, the famous Tsarevich of Russia, represents another tragedy. In fact, most of Queen Victoria's grandsons and great-grandsons would have tragic lives above and beyond their disease process. And Princess Alex, later the Tsaritsa Alexandra of Russia, was the younger sister of Princess Irene. Alexandra was married to Tsar Nicholas II of Russia, and she bore her husband 4 healthy daughters before, in 1904, she finally gave birth to the son and heir to the Russian throne. Tsarevich Alexei Nikolaevich was a beautiful little boy with blonde hair, blue eyes, rambunctious, and probably a bit spoiled. However, he soon developed the navel bleeding and bruising that were common to a hemophiliac, and Alexandra realized, much to her sadness, that she had brought this disease into the Russian imperial family. Her desperation to seek a cure for her son led her eventually to seek the services of a mystic and faith healer known as Grigory Rasputin. Grigory Rasputin is most famous for his intervention after an incident in 1912 where Alexei nearly died after an incident where he was jumping from a dock into a boat and ground his knee into one of the oarlocks of the boat. He lay in agony for several weeks, and as he was on the brink of death, a telegram came from Rasputin telling the Empress, "Do not worry, the little one will not die." Alexei's condition turned around, and he was eventually able to recover, although he was unable to walk normally for several months afterwards. What exactly Rasputin was able to do for the Tsarevich, doctors and historians have debated to this day. They've also debated just exactly what part Alexei's illness and the Tsaritsa's involvement with Rasputin played in the ultimate overthrow of the Russian imperial monarchy in 1917. After 1917, as his family was in captivity, Alexei's condition continued to deteriorate. In 1918, just a few weeks before their death, while they were imprisoned in Siberia, Alexei was involved in yet another accident, riding his sled down the stairs of a house. He soon developed a hemorrhage, and he was unable to walk. Finally, on July 17th of 1918, it was his father, Tsar Nicholas II, who carried Alexei, not then 14 years old, he was only a month shy of his 14th birthday, down into the basement of what has been called the House of Special Purpose, or the Ipatiev House, in Ekaterinburg, Russia. There the family was herded into a small room, and moments later, The Tsar, the Tsaritsa, their 4 daughters, Alexei, and 4 servants were gunned down by a firing squad. Alexei, who survived the initial onslaught of bullets, was eventually bayoneted, clubbed, and shot twice in the ear before he died. His remains would be discovered in 2007, along with that of one of his sisters. And in 2009, DNA testing revealed that the gene which plagued Queen Victoria's extended family was hemophilia B, the more rare and more severe form of the disease. It also revealed that one of Alexandra's daughters, either Maria or Anastasia, would have herself been a carrier had she been allowed to grow up, get married, and have a family of her own. Alexei was not the only one of Queen Victoria's descendants who saw his world crash tragically around him. Queen Victoria also had a younger daughter, her youngest, Princess Beatrice. Princess Beatrice would have 3 boys, 2 of which would have hemophilia. Prince Leopold would die in his 30s from a bleed-out during a routine knee surgery. Prince Maurice would finally be the one of Victoria's descendants who would get his dream of going into the military. However, he also would die of wounds sustained in battle. Because Prince Maurice went into the military, some historians have debated whether he had actually had hemophilia. However, this was World War I, people were desperate for manpower, and all of these boys who became men were desperate and anxious to lead normal lives, and many of them did aspire into the military service. Leopold and Maurice had a younger sister, Princess Victoria Eugenia. Victoria married King Alfonso XIII of Spain and bore her husband 6 children, including 4 boys. 2 of her boys would also unfortunately have the hemophilia disease. Prince Alfonso, Prince of the Asturias, the heir to the Spanish throne, and his younger brother Gonzalo. These boys would also see the end of the world they knew in 1931 when the Spanish monarchy was abolished during the Civil War, which would ultimately lead to the dictatorship of Francisco Franco. The family went into exile, and in 1934, Prince Gonzalo and his sister Princess Beatriz were driving in a car. Beatriz was driving when she had to swerve the car suddenly to avoid a cyclist in the middle of the road. The car crashed into a wall, and although Beatriz and Gonzalo emerged appearing to be unhurt, within hours Gonzalo was dead of massive internal hemorrhaging. In 1938, his older brother, Prince Alfonso, crashed his car into a telephone booth and also died several hours later in agony from massive internal hemorrhaging as a result of his own hemophilia. With the death of these princes, direct great-grandsons of Queen Victoria, the disease appears to have left her descendants. None of the descendants that included Prince Philip, King Juan Carlos, or Queen Elizabeth appear to have had the disease at all, and their children and grandchildren also likewise appear healthy. Hopefully the disease will never plague their families again. However, it did play a part in the early tragedies that these young men faced, particularly that of Alexei in Russia, and it would be a horrible disease for any family to have to undergo, regardless of their station in life.